Yo, welcome to True Healing and Recovery. Welcome to the show where chains break, minds wake, and purpose takes its rightful place. Hey, let me ask you a serious question. Serious question, all right? What if some people are not simply self destructive? What if they're wounded? What if they're wounded? What if addiction, anger, those toxic relationships, the self sabotage, depression, the destructive behaviors, what if they're all connected to pain that people never healed from? Now, before somebody says, "Oh, here we go, Coach Mike, making excuses," I want you to stay with me. Please stay with me for just a little while. Because today we're stepping into one of the most emotional and controversial debates in modern recovery and mental health. And what is that? It's the debate between trauma and personal responsibility. You see, some people say, man, people use trauma as an excuse for bad behavior. Others will say, you cannot heal behavior without understanding the wound underneath it. And honestly, there's truth on both sides of those things because somewhere between victim mentality and harsh judgment is the truth that many people desperately need. And today, right now, we're going in there. Okay, we're jumping in on this because I believe this with all of my heart, ladies and gentlemen. Addiction is not the primary problem. Addiction is the symptom. The real battle is identity, trauma, belief systems, and emotional survival. And if we do not heal the wound, we will spend our lives managing symptoms while silently bleeding internally. So today, we're talking about childhood trauma, abandonment, neglect, PTSD, emotional survival, accountability, healing, and how people can stop drowning in the pain that nobody sees. All right, and listen, before we begin, if these conversations are helping you heal, grow, and just think differently, I want you to do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. All right, because this is not just content, ladies and gentlemen. This is real conversation for real people fighting real battles. And somebody out there right now needs hope. So let's go. One of the most dangerous lies people believe is simply this: man, if I can't see the wound, it must not exist. But emotional wounds don't always bleed publicly. Some people learned to smile through the trauma. Some learned how to laugh through the pain, how to work through the depression, how to serve others while secretly collapsing inside, right? And many people grew up surviving environments that they should have never had to survive. That's the reality with a lot of individuals. Some people listening right now were abandoned emotionally, rejected repeatedly, screamed at daily, right? Verbally abused daily, uh, just neglected, physically abused, betrayed, exposed to addiction at a young age, exposed to violence at a young age. And when those things happen repeatedly during childhood, ladies and gentlemen, The brain adapts. The nervous system adapts. The child adapts. Some children become emotionally numb. Some become people pleasers. Some become extremely angry. Some become addicted. And many people never realize that their adult behavior is connected to childhood survival patterns. And that's why trauma matters. Not because it excuses behavior, but because it explains origins. And if we don't understand origins, we keep treating humans like machines instead of wounded people. There you go. I said it. I said it. So let's take it a little deeper. Many addicts were not introduced to substance first, right? We were not introduced to the substance first. What we and what they were introduced to, they were introduced to emotional instability first, right? The chaos in the home, the fear that was in the home, the rejection. See, some children grew up constantly anxious because they never know if mom or dad was going to be drunk that night, if dad is angry, if violence is coming, right? If bills are going to get paid, if they'll be abandoned and left alone again. And children are not designed to carry adult emotional burdens, ladies and gentlemen. But many did anyway. And many are carrying them right now as we speak. And when a child grows up emotionally unsafe, guess what? Their nervous system often remains in survival mode long into adulthood. What does that mean? Coach, what does that mean? See, that means that anxiety feels normal. The emotional chaos feels normal. The dysfunction feels normal. The toxic relationships feel normal. And eventually, many people discover substances that temporarily quiet the internal chaos of what they're experiencing. Alcohol quiets the anxiety. The opioids, they numb that pain. Meth creates false confidence, right? Marijuana slows the racing thoughts. And suddenly, boom, the substance feels like relief. Not because the person is evil, but because internally they're exhausted. Emotionally exhausted. And that matters because people are often judged by behaviors. While nobody asks the question, yo, what happened to them? And that's important. Now, let me balance this carefully, because this is where controversy enters. Some people hear trauma conversations and believe accountability disappears. And honestly, that does happen sometimes. There are folks that use the trauma card and they don't hold themselves accountable. You know, there are many people actually who become trapped in the victim identity, right? Everything becomes someone else's fault, society's fault, their parents' fault, or their trauma's fault. And while trauma may explain behaviors, healing still requires responsibility. This is crucial to understand, because understanding your wound is not the same as surrendering your future to it. See, you are not responsible for what happened to you as a child, but eventually you become responsible for what you do with your healing and how you heal. That's hard, but it's true. Because some people stay trapped emotionally for years because they never move from why did this happen to me to what do I do now? And I say this with a ton of compassion, not judgment. I'm not being judgmental, folks. Listen, healing requires both. Healing requires understanding and ownership, not one without the other. So I speak this with compassion. Let's talk about something that I see destroys people. And it destroyed me too at one time in my life. Shame. Shame, ladies and gentlemen. Because many people struggling with addiction already hate themselves. And when recovery spaces only focus on accountability without compassion, people often spiral deeper internally. They already know they messed up. They already know they lied. They hurt people. They failed. They disappointed others. What many people don't know is how to heal emotionally. And this is why some people relapse after periods of sobriety. Because substance were never just about pleasure. They were medicine for emotional pain. Your substance, most of the time we turn to substance for that emotional pain. Unhealthy medicine, right? Destructive medicine. That's what it was. But emotional medicine, nonetheless, it was helping us out emotionally. I'm talking from experience, ladies and gentlemen, my lived experience. So, when recovery removes substance without teaching emotional healing, many people feel emotionally exposed. Like raw nerves. That's why trauma-informed recovery matters. Not because we excuse behavior, but because we understand. Because we understand. Pain ignored becomes pain repeated. Here's something powerful. Many adults are still reacting from wounds they experienced as a child. Their the grown body matured, right? The physical body matured, but the wounded child inside never healed. So now rejection feels unbearable. Abandonment feels catastrophic. Criticism feels crushing. And loneliness feels dangerous. Think about the generation we're living in now, everybody is so, it's so easy to offend by telling a basic truth. People are beginning, or people begin reacting emotionally from unresolved wounds. And that's why some people sabotage relationships, push people away, explode emotionally. That's why people self-medicate and disappear emotionally. Not because they want destruction, but because survival patterns become identity. And healing often begins when people finally realize, I am reacting from pain I never processed. See, that awareness changes lives. Not overnight, but it starts the process. And if somebody listening right now, if you are listening right now, if you're relating to this, I need you to hear me carefully. You're not crazy. You're not weak. And you're not beyond repair. But healing will require some honesty. Real honesty. This may be the most important part of this episode. We must understand the root. We must understand the root without worshiping the wound. Coach, what do you mean by that? Some people become so attached to their trauma identity that healing almost feels threatening to them. Because what happens? Pain became familiar. But healing requires eventually saying, yes, this happened to me, but this will not define the rest of my life. That's powerful. That truth is powerful. And this is where personal responsibility becomes beautiful instead of shame. Responsibility means I still have power. Power to heal, power to grow, power to forgive, to rebuild, to learn, to change old patterns, to become emotionally healthy. And that's hopeful, ladies and gentlemen. Because no matter how broken your past was, your future does not have to repeat it. That's the message that people need. Not condemnation, not excuses, but hope. So now we arrive at the deepest layer. The deepest layer, folks. Identity. Identity. Many people who experience childhood trauma unconsciously develop beliefs like I'm unwanted, I'm unsafe, I'm unlovable, I'm broken beyond repair. I always mess up. I'm always failing. Nobody stays. I, I'm always being abandoned. And those beliefs quietly shape your behavior. That's why healing is not just behavioral. It's identity reconstruction. Because if someone still believes internally that they're worthless, self-destruction will always feel close to them. That's why I say over and over and over again, addiction is not the primary problem. Addiction is the symptom. The real battle is identity, is trauma, is belief system, is the emotional survival. And until we heal there, people will continue searching for external relief internally. Now, for the person listening right now, maybe nobody protected you properly. Maybe you had to survive things that people never saw. Maybe you became strong because weakness was never safe. Maybe your addiction, anger, fear, depression, or the emotional walls started off as survival. But please, please hear me carefully. Survival is not where your story has to end. Healing is possible. Real healing, not fake positivity, not pretending the pain never happened, but true healing where your mind becomes healthier, where your emotions stabilize, where your identity rebuilds, where your relationships improve, where your soul breathes again. And yes, accountability matters. But accountability without compassion crushes people. And compassion without accountability traps people. So we need both. We need both. And if this podcast has helped you, if these conversations speak to your heart, if they challenge you, encourage you, or help you feel less alone, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel right now, because there are too many people silently drowning behind some of those smiles. And together, we're going to keep exposing the real battle behind addiction and healing. To the person listening right now, your trauma may explain some of your behaviors, but it does not eliminate your value. You're not broken. You're not too damaged, too addicted, too traumatized, or too far gone. Healing is still possible for you. One step at a time, one decision at a time, one day at a time. So welcome to the show where chains break, minds wake, and purpose takes its rightful place. And remember, healing starts with today's decision. Another day, another blessing. Peace.